Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Jill Allen here. I wanted to take a little bit of time and just put out some information for each of my doctors and team members and anybody else who may be listening or following, and just how can we in the orthodontic community deal with and handle what's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic that's hitting our communities, hitting our just where we live, our practices. And so what I thought I'm going to do over the next 4 days is I'm going to put out a series of small videos, 15 minutes each, just to kind of talk about and give my teams and my doctors some very practical approaches to how they can handle maybe changes in the office, what they can do with their team members. So I'm going to jump in today and we're going to talk a little bit about finance and employees. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about practice pivot points and how we can use technology, virtual consults, different tools to help you stay going. And then, just what can we do with taking advantage of the pause that some of us are being required to take? And then finally, we're going to follow up with some marketing tips for how can we continue to market as we're going through this pandemic. So first thing I want to jump in and talk about is finances and our employees. And this has been a big topic that I've had a lot of calls, a lot of texts about over the last couple days. And I think that, I've got doctors and, I kind of look at it as we're in three different spots as we're going along. And it's kind of funny because one of the books that I have been reading, or I do audiobooks, so one of the books that I have been audibly listening to is by Marie Forleo, and it's the book Everything is Figureoutable. And I thought, how appropriate for what we're going through right now. And I absolutely believe that as doctors and as team members out there, and as just a community as a whole, we can get through this. We can figure this out. There is solutions. It just takes maybe thinking outside of the box a little bit and taking time to pivot. And one of the points that comes out of that book is that when you're thinking about problems and you're thinking about what's going on, we need to train our brains to be more creative and think positively about figuring out how to change outcomes of situations, especially when we are amidst setbacks. So what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to jump into what I think most doctors and most employees are thinking about right now, and that is finances. Everybody's a little bit scared about this. As most of you know, I focus most of my consulting services on working with doctors who are young startup practices, maybe doctors who've been in practice 8 years or less, or 8 years to retirement. And this is a big deal. I've had just within the last couple months here, I've had 12 new practices open up. What a scary time to be a new doctor opening up. But I think what we have to do is say, okay, what are the positives that we can find out of a situation like this, and how can we move forward? And that is my hope in this next week as we go through these little mini series, that I can be able to be a calm in your storm and maybe, again, just give you some really practical advice. So the first thing I want to talk about to my doctors out there, to my employers out there that have small teams, is I think the best thing that you can do right now is be open and honest with your employees. And I think whether it's one employee or all of your employees, I think you need to sit down and have a one-on-one talk with your employees and just find out where they're at. What are their obstacles as they're going through this? Obviously, we know that we've got obstacles in the practice, especially for many of my practices that have been asked to shut down or mandated to shut down. But, for the ones that are maybe in a little bit of a limbo still, making a decision on, do I shut down? Do I stay open? Do I do limited scheduling or whatnot? I think that it's really important that we talk to our employees, take the time to find out where they're at, take a pulse on what they're going through, and then be open and honest with them about what you're going through as a small business owner. And I want you to just really think about, there are options out there. They may not be ideal, but they're things that we can, talk about. So let's talk about financing a little bit. One of the things I think as a doctor you really have to be thinking about is, can I manage payroll? And for how long can I manage it? Now, again, working with a lot of startups, I know that we start with a smaller amount of money. We're planning. We've got some working capital, but we are planning on those starts coming in. And when we get mandated to shut down, or we're volunteering, to shut down, or we're going to do reduced hours, that can really make a big difference. So I really want you thinking about how long can you go? What can you manage? And what are maybe some ways that you can think outside of the box to continue to keep your employee or employees in place? Now, the other thing that I think is really important to think about is, what is your overhead? Are there any things that we can do right now to maybe cut down some of our costs? Maybe there's some extra services that we were thinking of bringing on. Maybe there's some memberships that we could, cut out or slow down. Maybe we even, look at the different types of treatment modalities that we're doing, especially again in our smaller practices where cash flow is already going to be an issue. Maybe there's some alternatives to aligner treatments or whatever out there. I think that this is the time to just critically think about that. And I'm here to help. So if you've got questions about, Jill, how can I, is there any changes immediately that I can make to my overhead? What can I do here or there? Let's talk about it. Let's see if we can brainstorm through this. Another thing I think is really important to think about is, what does that cash flow look like with any collections that are already on your books. Again, now you could be one of my docs that are, my more established practices that have a lot of cash flow going on, and you can ride this storm out with what is already on your books and continuing to push your contracts through. Or you may be one of my younger practices that, we have only got 10 or 12 AR accounts on our books so far, and we're just, working to build that up. And I think this is where we're really going to have to look at, do we, appropriate our money? Do we maybe decide that we're going to slow down on some marketing in certain areas, maybe move it into a cash flow areas to continue to pay our employee or employees? I think those are all things that we need to be thinking about, and just thinking very critically about. And then the last thing is, how do we continue to produce when and if we are asked to shut down? And that's definitely something I'm going to jump into in our next episode tomorrow. But I think it's something we need to think about. So when we are thinking about, and I kind of look at this with my offices in three different options. So my first group is, we're going to talk about an office that has been asked to close. So if you have been mandated to close because of state, regulations, city regulations, or maybe you have just personally made the decision that it is best for you, for your community, for your practice to close, what I want you thinking about is, just because your doors are closed doesn't necessarily mean that your practice has to be closed. So are there other things that we can be doing and working on while our practices are closed? And I think that, again, I'm going to jump into this a little bit more in the next couple days, but what do you do with your employee or employees if you've been asked to close? The first thing I would just encourage you to think about is, maybe this is a good time for everybody just to take a vacation. If you've offered vacation, if it's available, give it to your employees. Take the time to enjoy being with your friends, your family at home, and just, take that time, that enforced time, if you're deciding to completely close the office. Otherwise, really, be aware of what your options are. The other thing that I think is really important is, every single doctor should be, and team members too, you guys should be looking into, what is your unemployment option for your state. I know every state is putting out different mandates. Every state is, allowing for, I won't say every state, but I know many states are allowing for employees, if their hours have been cut back and they cannot work due to, daycare or the virus itself hitting their families or whatnot, they're being allowed to apply for unemployment and could get an option. And from everything that I'm reading and seeing, this doesn't mean that that's a hit against us as an employer with our unemployment rates going up. So I think you need to be looking at that. You need to look specifically at your state. If you've got a payroll provider, be looking at that as well. Um, the other thing is, maybe you are slow enough that you can manage this on your own. Maybe you had a part-time employee and your employee is saying, or full-time, and your employee is saying, hey, honestly, I just want to be able to focus on my kids and my family and stay home while you're closed. I think doctors, we've got a lot of resources out there that you still be able to manage what's happening in your practice. And again, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. The next practice that I see and place that I see a lot of my doctors are in right now are in this essential appointments only, where maybe their state hasn't told them that you have to completely shut down, but you are being limited to just being able to see patients that are in the emergent area. So one of the things that I'm really encouraging my docs, if we are running, kind of a lighter schedule or an emergent schedule at all, is what can your team do? How can you set up your hours so that your team can still be working, you can still be accepting new phone calls, you can still be out there working the practice, but not necessarily be seeing patients in your practice. I think that when you've got a team, you can talk to your team about maybe there's an option for job share options in the office. Maybe you've got a team that says, hey, I'll work the morning shift, you work the afternoon shift. We can switch daycare with kids. I'll take care of your kids, you take care of my kids. I think there's a lot of options out there, but you just have to talk to your teams and you have to find out what they're willing to do and then what you need to have happen in the office. And I think if you work at this together, we're going to have a really good outcome because this will pass and we will be able to move forward from here. Finally, the last group that I see is, we still have a lot of practices that are still able to be open for business. Either their city or state has not told them they need to shut down, or they've just decided that, for them, they're going to maybe reduce hours. Maybe you're going to have flexible hours. Maybe they're going to give their teams an opportunity to, again, look at some of that job sharing opportunity. I think that one of the best things that we can do if we're going to stay open for business is, maybe we can reduce our hours, push our patients out. Again, we're going to dive a little deeper into this in one of our next videos. But for your patients that are there, maybe you're offering certain appointments where only new patients are coming in and you're limiting the amount of patients per day or the amount of patients per hour that are coming in. And, you're making sure that your team has got plenty of time to sterilize and clean, which we're already doing within our practices, but just really making sure that your patients see what you're doing there. And the thing that I think that I really want my docs to be aware of is we need to have a plan in place for any of my docs that are staying open right now for a potential mandate for closures. I think we still have a lot coming down the line here. And I think that now is the time to be thinking about what will happen if I am asked to close or if I have to close. Have I talked to my team members? Do I know which team members would like to take vacation? Maybe some of your employees just want to take off completely. And maybe the best thing that you can do is just hold a position for them when you open your practice again. I think that now is the time that we have to be flexible. We have to think outside of the box, and we have to be honest with our team, honest with ourselves about how long you can go and what you are going to be able to do in this next 2 to 3 to 4 weeks as things are really changing. One thing I do know is we will get through this, and we are going to come out on the other side of this. So as I kind of finish up for today's 15-minute points here, I want to talk about tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about pivot points, virtual consults, how we're each going to be able to work with helpful tech. I think that's going to be really important. And just want you to know that myself and my team, we are here to help. We are here to answer questions. I just want to be a resource for any doctor, any team member out there, and hoping that if I can put good information in front of you, you are going to be able to know that you've got a lifeline out